Cities, and by the members of Channel 2.
Next time on The Shape of the World, the daring 15th century explorers who braved the unknown perils of the sea in their quest for knowledge, riches, and power. Join host Patrick Stewart for The Secrets of the Seas, next time on The Shape of the World.
Monday night at 9, here on Channel 2.
You're watching Channel 2, Twin Cities Public Television.
The following edition of Almanac was recorded Friday evening for rebroadcast at this time.
Almanac is a production of KTCA TV for the stations of Minnesota Public Television.
Many of you out there, or at least maybe one or two of you, are watching this program because you have VCR Plus, the new high-tech recording system. Even if you don't have VCR Plus, you have probably noticed that the number 3124 is crammed into the TV guide box for Almanac this week. Now, these VCR Plus numbers change each week according to a secret formula. Secret until tonight, that is. Here's how the TV gurus assigned the code number 3124 for tonight's show. The square root of 3124 is 55.9, which is precisely the age of DJ Leary, who will be part of the political panel tonight. 3124 divided by 89.25 is 35, which is guest Paul Wellstone's latest approval rating. And of course, 3124 is, counting tonight, the number of times that Minnesota public officials have debated the workers' comp issue. So, pull up a chair, put up your feet, grab a slice of your favorite pie, 3.1416, and join us for this special mathematical edition of Almanac.
Funding for Almanac is provided in part by the law firm of Larkin, Hoffman, Daly, and Lindgren, specializing in government relations, general business, and environmental law. Northstan Incorporated, a distributor for telecommunications equipment products, including IBM Rome. Sturtz, Bernards & Company, a professional association of certified public accountants and management consultants. Group Health, Inc., Minnesota's only member-governed health plan, with medical and dental care in over 50 Twin Cities locations. Gabbard's Furniture and Design Studio of Edina. There's no place like home, and there's no place like Gabbard's. And by Northern States Power Company, someone to count on for energy and energy services. Business Affairs Reporting on Almanac is presented through a grant from Cooperative Power, providing electric energy to member cooperatives in west, central, and southern Minnesota.
I was out of town all last week, so imagine my dismay at missing out on what could have been the most talked about event of all time. Hamlin United Methodist Church in St. Paul put an ad in the Pioneer Press the Monday before Easter reading, and I kid you not, autograph signing Jesus Christ in person, 9 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. Sunday, March 31st. Now you have to understand, I make my living as a publicity guy, and nobody appreciates good hype more than I do. Well, this is hype at its best, what I call MYL marketing, as in made you look, made you look. Never mind the fact that if a restaurant or a shopping mall or a racetrack had placed this ad, it would have been publicly smeared for blasphemy. Well, guess what? Jesus never showed. Instead, Reverend Rick Ireland delivered a sermon entitled God's Signature. But it got me to wondering, how much would Jesus be able to charge for autographs if he did start making public appearances again? I mean, that's the way it's done now. Pete Rose, who's no saint, much less a Messiah, still gets 15 or 20 bucks per signature, and he's been cranking them out for 30 years. Well, Jesus' autographs are real rare. And heck, his reputation has stood up a lot better than Pete's. By the way, you want to hear my favorite Bible sports joke? When is baseball first mentioned in the Bible? Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, in the big inning. Well, meanwhile, on this Sunday's events calendar, a public service announcement sent to us by the University of Minnesota's Goldstein Gallery on the St. Paul campus informs us there will be an exhibition called Mention the Unmentionables, 100 Years of Underwear. Again, I'm not making this up. According to the release, the show will, and I quote, address the provocative question, why is underwear unmentionable? Some of the exhibits I'm hoping will be included: boxer shorts from form versus function, a brief history of underpants, and the inventor of pantyhose, madman or messiah. It's twice for messiah in one monologue. Can't tell if anyone will be signing autographs there or not. Again, this really happened. A California businessman suggested the state raise money to help balance its budget by installing 900 phone numbers in prison cells of convicted murderers Sirhan Sirhan and Charles Manson. That way the state would collect an inflated price for offering the bizarre privilege of a conversation with one of these sickos. I don't know which I find harder to believe, that someone would actually come up with a disgusting idea like this, or that the amoral, cash-strapped California legislature would turn it down. Don't kid yourself. I've heard that Arnie Carlson has considered a similar scam in an effort to make a dent in Minnesota's deficit. He wanted to set up a Jim Baker line, to style 1-900 Jimmy B, and for 95 cents a minute you can hear Jim's plans for the future and get useful fashion tips from Tammy. And heck, if you stay on the line long enough, I'll bet they'll even tell you when the next Jesus autograph session will take place. Flat items only, please.
It'll be a short walk, but let's take it together, shall we, through some of the week's headlines. During the weekend, a suit against Carleton College made news. 4 women alleged that the school failed to stop a series of rapes and assaults by 2 male students, and that a top administrator discouraged them from going to the police. College officials denied the charges. On Monday, the Fond du Lac Indian Reservation's Governing Council delayed a decision on whether it will allow tribal members to spearfish on lakes outside the reservation in northeastern Minnesota. A decision is expected in the next couple of weeks. On Wednesday, 13 Minneapolis postal workers were arrested on drug trafficking charges. They were alleged to have used drugs themselves and sold them to other postal employees at the workplace. Yesterday, the Minnesota Court of Appeals overturned a lower court order in the so-called Baby D adoption case, the higher court ruling that the 20-month-old black child should stay with her white parents in Tonka Bay rather than be taken by her black grandparents who live in the state of Virginia, pending a final ruling by the lower court. First tonight, Budget Summit Round 2. Now, the morning newspapers contain some disputes about what actually was or was not decided at last night's meeting between the governor and legislative leaders. Now, we figured we could have brought in as many of the participants as we could find, throw them on the couch and let them argue about what actually happened. But instead, we decided to just let you decide for yourself. Here are some highlights, courtesy of Metro Cable Channel 6 and our own Jim Bickle.
I would like to very briefly go through some of the facts and figures that we took a look at.
Budget Summit 2 began by reviewing the governor's property tax proposal and the limited accomplishments of Budget Summit 1. Members of Governor Carlson's administration and IR legislators then presented examples of problems with the current property tax system.
And our lower income people or many renters are paying 25% of their rent is going towards property taxes. There is no free lunch.
IR Senator John Bernhagen presented an alternative tax proposal that would shift property tax burdens, but not as radically as the governor's plan. Then, as he did in the first summit, Governor Carlson asked the Democrats for a proposal. What he got instead was a calendar.
I don't know if we have a copy of this for everybody, but this is kind of the committee process that we intend to use. And, you know, kind of keep in mind, Governor, you just have to convince yourself. The Speaker has to convince 66 other people, and I've got to convince 33 other people of the wisdom of a tax policy or spending policy, whatever the case may be. This particular chart just gives you the time frames that we intend to work under.
The governor then tried to reach a consensus on the concept of eliminating the third tier of property taxes for homeowners. In current law, home values over $110,000 are taxed at 3%.
Let me ask you the hard question. Is everybody here in favor of elimination of the 3?
It has entirely to do with how you pay for it. Do you raise the revenue to pay for it, or do you continue shifting the burden more and more onto modest and middle value homes. Now, if that is the resolution to the tax relief for the high value homes, and that is the resolution to the tax relief you propose for the high value businesses, the pressure you put on those low and mid value homes is simply not to be borne.
What you would favor would be any kind of a movement in the 3 or the CI would have to be another buy down, is that correct?
What I'm saying is that we do have genuine sympathy, particularly for those high-value homes. We're willing to work with you. We're anxious to work with you. But we're not going to do it at the expense of typical middle-class, middle-income homeowners.
I fully agree with you. I'm very supportive of what you're saying philosophically. The problem I have is you've imposed a 23% increase on those people already, and you're not willing to do anything about it, including phase up to that problem.
Governor, you know, it's
what do you want
to
do to address that problem?
Governor, let me tell you something. Last year I passed a tax bill with some very real misgivings that cut over $300 million in local government aids. And you want to know why we're seeing the property tax hikes we're seeing today and in 1992? Because we did that, because we did it the year before.
After an hour, Governor Carlson adjourned Budget Summit 2, calling it a success because it produced the Senate schedule for bill processing. Most other participants said it was a waste of time.
We'll have more on the summit later on with our political panel. Last week, it was announced as an historic agreement between business and labor. This week, Hormel's CEO, Richard Knowlton, said it was so bad it would stop his plans to expand in the state. Sound confusing? Well, then you understand the state of workers' compensation reform in the legislature. Now, pay attention. Lots of people seem to agree there is room for reform, but that is where agreement ends. As it stands, there are 2 bills. The AFL-CIO Minnesota Chamber of Commerce Compromise Plan, to which I just referred, would reduce insurance rates for businesses by 11%, freeze rates for 2 years, and shift administrative costs from businesses to the state. The competing bill, proposed by Governor Carlson and supported by business leaders like Knowlton, would cut insurance rates by 17%, freeze current rates for only a year, and cut worker benefits, especially to workers with partial injuries. Jim Gustafson carries the governor's bill in the Senate. He is a Republican from Duluth. Senator Don Frank supports the other bill. He is a DFLer from Spring Lake Park, and also joining us tonight, Malin Schneider, a vice president at Hormel. We invited leaders from the AFL-CIO and the Minnesota Chamber to join us as well, but they declined our invitation. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us this evening. Mr. Schneider, why is Hormel so opposed to the AFL-CIO Chamber of Commerce Compromise Reform Plan?
Because it really lacks any principles underlying basic reform. An example, we have addressed the whole issue of safety in the workplace. That is, after all, the philosophy underlying worker compensation law, provide a safe working environment for the employee. And over the last 6 years, we have lowered and improved our safety record to the point where we are 5.5 times better than the industry average. Yet we pay, as an employer, worker compensation costs in Minnesota something like 10 times what we pay for our employees employed in Wisconsin. And from our point of view, the governor has made it a central focus of his legislation, which Senator Gustafson is proposing and supporting, to say, look, we are going to encourage and reward those employers who provide safe working environments, and that is totally absent from the negotiated bill.
Senator Frank, this is a case where businesses might get, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 effective % relief is what they say, and it's $32 million in money out of a strapped state treasury. Why have you signed on to this? Is there any reform in this thing?
Well, basically, the reason that I agree with it is that for the first time since the mid-70s, a faction of labor and a faction of business has sat down and agreed that they will come to some agreement for cuts. We have $110 million cuts in this bill, of which, of course, 27 is for administrative costs coming out of general budget, 5 million is a loan. Now, some people say, why are we proposing the 27 million? Well, prior to 1985, administrative costs in the workers' comp program was indeed paid by general fund. Since 1985, it has not been. It's rather interesting to me to listen to some folks that say we can't afford it, yet as recently as 1988, they supported having the general fund support the administrative costs.
We got a payroll tax proposal to pick up the 27 million, or is that just, have you got a way to fund that, or are you just going to take it right off?
That's going to have to come right out of general operating budget.
But the central question for the governor and for Senator Gustafson and for us is, why are we asking the taxpayers to pick up this cost? The governor has made it very clear. The governor has made it very clear that, look, we have a problem with the providers and with everyone who is part of this system, and we're going to ask everybody to contribute equally.
But
and
your
instead,
organization, as recently as 1988, supported that having the state fund pay for it. That's what's ironic with reference to that issue alone. As recently as 1988, that was part of their proposal.
and it's precisely why this is better legislation, because the governor is saying, Senator Gustafson is saying, Senator Chmielewski is saying, look, we want the people who are part of the problem to be part of the solution.
Well, I really believe, honestly, that what you're saying is that you don't want to admit that indeed this is historical. We have now, for the first time for many, many years, gotten back to what we did in the 1970s. Business and labor sat down for many, many times. They came out with recommendations to the legislature. This is the first time. Now, I've sat on that committee for 11 years, and this is the first time I've ever seen this happen.
Senator Gustafson, how come you're not with your good friend Don Frank on this thing?
Well, I try to be with Don as often as I can, but
rarely.
Well, here we are.
Actually, that issue kind of begs the question that most regulatory agencies of the state are paid for out of general funds. But the real question is, can we devise a program that is fair to injured workers, can make Minnesota competitively nationwide, and move ahead with the other problems that are facing the state, both the budget problems and job creation. The bill that the governor supports and the bipartisan bill addresses many, many issues. The court problem, the purveyors of medical services, the general administrative costs, and attacks certain areas where most people agree that the benefits are too rich. If that's the case, then we have a structural bill that will change for the first time in many, many years how we deal with the injured worker. Treat them fairly, treat them in such a fashion that the dispute can be resolved quickly, and get him back to work. That's what the whole issue of workers' comp is all about. That's what the bill that the governor is proposing, I'm supporting, a bipartisan coalition of Republicans and Democrats.
Who's led to the... Oh, I'm sorry.
What's wrong with his approach?
Well, what they really would like to do, they're kind of dancing around the core issue. The core issue in workers' comp, as everybody knows, is we in Minnesota pay supplemental benefits. That means that when someone is injured, over time, their benefits increase. Most states, if not all around us, do not do that. I see South Dakota having an increase last year of 23% in their rates. We had an 8%, Wisconsin had a 1.9. Wisconsin was very fortunate. Our rate increase is modest, but we are dancing around with that proposal around the core issue of supplemental benefits. We know, you know as well as I do, that sooner or later they're going to come back and try to address supplemental benefits, and that means if you're injured today, down the road you'll be on perpetual poverty, and that's crazy. We chose not to do that many years ago, and we choose not to do that again.
Well, I think it's important to point out that you only qualify for supplemental benefits if, in fact, you've been determined to be permanently and totally disabled. And yet the average median disability of those people classified as permanently and totally disabled is 16%.
But that's where the money is.
There is something badly out of whack with a system that rewards people and classifies them as permanently and totally disabled when, in fact, they are physically able to work. And that is an underlying principle of the governor's bill that is totally absent from the negotiated bill between Labor and the Chamber of Commerce.
Mr. Gustafson and Mr. Frank, have either of you done any head counts in terms of which bill may have more votes than the other? Senator Gustafson, do you know?
Well, up until the Chamber came forth with this so-called compromise bill, we had enough votes on the floor of the Senate and the House to pass the governor's bill. Right today, I can't say for sure, but it'd be very close.
But you would say, would you not, Senator Gustafson, that if the business community is not united behind this bill, that for sure we're going to get the governor's bill and your bill?
That's right.
Senator Frank, do you agree?
I take exception to that because we're going to pass the agreed compromise. That's going to pass. And I also don't count the same way Senator Gustafson. does, because prior never. Prior to the compromise, I still felt that we could stop that bill on the floor of the Minnesota Senate, and I still believe that today. I think we're going to pass the compromise bill.
All right, Senator Frank, Senator Gustafson, and Mr. Schneider, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, fellas.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, the biggest blaze new St. Paul Fire Chief Tim Fuller may have to extinguish is the one that has raged in the news media the past couple of years. Outgoing Chief Steve Conroy had been publicly connected to that alleged culture of arson in St. Paul, and the department itself has prominently displayed a disinclination to promote minorities and women. When Mayor Jim Scheibel nominated Fuller to the post a couple of weeks ago, some members of the city council doubted whether an insider could turn the fire department around. But this week, council was convinced when it unanimously confirmed his appointment, and Tim Fuller joins us. Hi, nice to see you, Chief. Women firefighters, you've got a test that's been challenged. You have to come up with a test, I guess, that will allow the hiring of women. Where does that stand, and can you kind of put that into terms we could understand as far as what will be changed and when it will be changed and when some women might be hired?
Well, we've been meeting with all of the players that are involved in the whole testing process. We've got City Attorney, Mayor's Office, Local 21, the Firefighters Union, myself, personnel. And what we've done is we've come up with a plan. And the plan would involve interim hiring of, part of it is an interim hiring plan whereby we would have a test, perhaps a test that's already validated from another city, and from a city that has female firefighters on it. And then give that physical test to the people who passed our written test. And of the people who passed the written test, we had about 17 women who took the test. There are 25 people from that would be selected from a protected class. And then they would if they pass that physical test, this all depends on the administrative law judge okaying the interim hiring proposal. And then determining whether it be ranked or pass-fail. So far, the Local 21 of the Firefighters Union has agreed in concept to the plan that we have. And once that's done, part of the interim hiring is a plan to utilize a clause called 17C, which allows us to go out and recruit firefighter paramedics from other cities. And from there will likely be women involved in that too, because there are firefighter paramedics in other cities. So.
Chief, then when do you think we may see, assuming women successfully pass both the written and physical tests, the first women to join the St. Paul Fire Department?
Optimistically, any firefighters, we're short about 41 firefighters right now. Seeing any firefighters on, even with this interim hiring proposal, we're looking at a date of maybe May or June of 1992.
Why do you think that there has continued to be some strong opposition, whether it represents the views of the majority of the firefighters, I'm not sure, but such strong opposition from the union with respect to women firefighters?
Well, I think there was a perception for a long time that the firefighters were afraid that maybe the test, if the test wasn't hard enough, they wouldn't get they felt they weren't going to get the qualified firefighters. Now, what we realize is there's a need to have a task-oriented test. And I think the firefighters see that too. And we can, with the right kind of testing, still get the qualified male and female firefighters. There's no problem with that.
By the way, this may seem a bit of an aside, but over the years, one seems to see both police officers and firefighters grow a bit in the girth. Are firefighters required to stay in shape so that at any time they could pass this test again if it were imposed?
Well, we have a physical fitness program, an annual testing, stress testing physical fitness program. They're required to work out so much a day while they're on duty, and they are stress tested frequently. We have a very high physical fitness rating for fire departments across the country because of that. But I think as they age, you have to realize our test is geared towards age too. So there are some factors in that. And I'd say on a whole, we're extremely well fit firefighters, yes.
You'll be the most closely scrutinized police chief in a while, I suppose.
Fire chief.
I hope
Fire chief.
I hope it's fire chief.
We're talking about police in the next thing.
All right.
I'm ahead of myself. Thanks.
Okay.
Fire Chief Fuller, thanks a lot.
Thank you. The governor has already praised the idea. Legislators think it's swell. Heck, even the Citizens League would jump on board if it had 12 months to do a study. The idea is a proposed merger of city and county law enforcement departments in Ramsey County, proposed by St. Paul Police Chief Bill McCutcheon and Ramsey County Sheriff Chuck Zacharias just a few weeks ago. This week, however, the Ramsey County Board let the bandwagon pass by when it called for a 9-month study of its own, delaying a decision until a half a year after the current legislative session. Representative Andy Dawkins has already sponsored a bill to merge the departments. Ruby Hunt sits on the Ramsey County Board. Representative Dawkins, you are known as a rather liberal Democrat, and it would seem by carrying such a label that you would be for more government, not less government. Therefore, why could you propose a lessening of government by the merger of these two departments?
Well, you know, Jan, people who really know me that I'm very fiscally conservative. I have a law office that's a storefront law office, and I've really made a mark for myself, I think, as someone that's looking for economies. And what I really want to talk about a little bit tonight is the bill that I think is going to pass. And it's not consolidation as much as it's restructuring. Which level of government will best deliver which services? It's not going to be just St. Paul and Ramsey County. It's going to be statewide, the townships and the counties. It's not going to be a force-it-down-your-throat approach. Rather, it's going to be an incentives that would encourage our local governments to plan and look at the bottom line as to where we can pass that acid test of actually doing more with less, or at least doing better with the same amount. And that's really the bill that I've been working on since last December. Now, the Ramsey County Sheriff and the Ramsey County and the St. Paul Police Chief came out with a bullet out blue and said, we can really do it. And I said, great, let's seize it. And so that bill's in the hopper as well. But I think it's going to be more than just the local police department.
Well, Commissioner Hunt, if your sheriff and the police chief of the big city in your county say, we can do this, leave it to the professionals, give up some turf, consolidate, and save everybody some money. What's wrong with that prescription?
Well, we think consolidation is good, and I think the timing is appropriate at this time. But I think there are a number of issues that have to be considered before you do the actual consolidation, such as the personnel issues that are involved, how the citizens feel about being assured that they're going to maintain an adequate level of service, how we're going to deal with the kinds of disparities in salaries of the various police forces. After all, there are 8 different police forces in Ramsey County, and there's a difference of 38% between the salary of a police officer at the beginning level in St. Paul and New Brighton.
Okay, well, let me ask you this, Ruby, though. If the legislature puts in a local government aids formula that's going to encourage you to speed up the actions, can you move faster? You have passed a resolution that says you're going to take 9 months to do it. If we said you got a timeline of 3 months to come up with a plan, and then we're going to use sort of a measuring stick, and as long as you're making the progress to do that, then there's going to be more dollars that you can deliver. And maybe it's going to be done through, this year we're talking about putting local options out there, and maybe we'll condition those local options on doing it. Can you move faster?
Well, I certainly think we can. However, I think the thrust of consolidation might require some legislation. So our timetable was geared to having something ready for the next session of the legislature after conferring with the various communities, the various elected officials, and the unions that are involved. I think we certainly will have a progress report within the next 2 or 3 months. Our policy analysis staff has already started the process of taking a look at the various kinds of things that have to be looked at.
The choice you really got, I think, is that this is a budget cutting year, okay? So if we don't make some move and let the governor know that we're serious about economies, I don't think that St. Paul is going to be seen as a favorable light as if we do it. So I just encourage you to keep on moving. And I know the county's been really trying.
Well, we have, and we've made progress. I think we've got a track record to fall back on. We're right in the process now of developing the coordination on the cooperation between the City of St. Paul and Ramsey County for its dispatch system, which is a very important and a very expensive system. We're prepared to do that within the next few weeks. So we did that without any prodding from the legislature, but I think it's well when the legislature gives some policy direction to the local units of government, because after all, we are creatures of state government.
How threatening an issue is this to the labor unions?
I've met with them, and I've let them know that the efficiencies of scale, the economies of scale, the dollars that we save out of doing this, I think need to be put to some of the kind of needs that we have, such as refunding URAP, the housing, the kids, things that we got. But also there has to be some of that money that's there for employee protection, to do the job retraining. I think that we may be able to do less employees on some of our current services and then retrain those employees to the other services that still need to be done.
Have you heard from any of the suburban communities who would suspect that perhaps this may require them to carry a greater tax burden for the police protection that is required in an inner city?
This is a real equity issue, because I do think the legislature is going to say this year in the tax bill that local governments are going to have the option of implementing a county-wide property tax, a county-wide sales tax, a county-wide payroll tax. And if that's done just on a city-by-city basis, it's not going to work. But if we do it on a Ramsey County-wide basis, it all fits very nicely.
I'm going to present this to Andy Dawkins. It's our slogan, yes, but, with a line through it. Nobody is going to say yes, but in Ramsey County. We're going to proceed to...
We're going to do it. I
gather
agree.
data.
I agree. Thank you.
This may be a first, ladies and gentlemen.
Almanac's
Shaking
done it
hands
again.
on the set. Commissioner Ruby Hunt, thank you. Representative Andy Dawkins, thank you.
Mr. Smith goes to Washington, turns some heads, runs into some roadblocks, drops in the polls. Not the kind of screenplay that freshman Minnesota Senator Paul Wellstone wanted, but some say that's the script he's written in the first 3 months he spent in Washington. His outspoken stand against initiating military action in the Persian Gulf, some say, contributed to a 35% approval rating in the polls a couple of weeks, as it was measured a couple of weeks ago. This week, Paul Wellstone is back in Minnesota meeting with constituents, and that includes us, and nice to have you back, Senator.
Good to be here.
You know, when we're sitting watching the war on TV in January, I'm not sure how many people focused on, well, then it ends, and then what happens to Iraq in the post-war period. And here you have these Kurdish, what are they, Kurdish nationals, I guess they are, in Iraq, and they're being slaughtered, apparently, and some very dire humanitarian situations have developed there. What should the U.S. be doing? I wonder if it would have been better to march to Baghdad and get rid of Saddam Hussein, and that would have taken care of the problem? Or?
Well, now we're lifting, you know, medical supplies and food, and why does it take so long to do the right thing? I think all of us feel very uncomfortable. I do. I don't think we should be on the sideline, and I think that we can and should and must play a major role with the United Nations and maximum leverage on Saddam Hussein to stop the massacre. But we've been on the sideline. So much of it has already taken place, and humanitarian aid. I mean, Eric, you know, it's been difficult to talk about the war. There's a lot of goodness in people. We're proud of troops. We're glad that loved ones have come back, you know, and that so few died, although one is one too many. But whether it's a new world order or where it's taking us, those are questions that we're going to have to deal with.
President Bush, in much of his talk prior to the war and during the war, was at least interpreted as saying that he wanted Saddam Hussein out and that he wanted to support the overthrow of Saddam Hussein. Do you think, based on President Bush's actions to date, he has reneged on that perception, at least, of where he was heading?
I think the Kurds and a lot of people in Iraq thought they would get more support than they have gotten, Jan. I want to be careful not to take a shot at anybody, including President Bush, but I think this is a moral question, and I think that we shouldn't be on the sidelines and just witnessing this carnage and this massacre of people. And again, I wished much earlier, and I did say it, that we should have been involved in trying to exert the leverage and having the United Nations take a major role. It's, I'm not proud of what we have done in regard to the Kurds. That's my own view.
How long do you figure Saddam Hussein can stay in power? Is he there for good? Is it, will he be overthrown in some way? Military get more involved? What would be a scenario you might see?
I don't know. I mean, it's people, you would think that the people in Iraq could hardly be satisfied with Saddam Hussein. So much pain people have gone through, but he's also brutal and has the military at his disposal still, and it's just very difficult to tell. The region has been scrambled, and the question is what next? And we can be, again, proud of troops and so grateful that there was minimum loss of life, but we don't know what's going to happen in Iraq. It doesn't look so great in Kuwait. And there's still a whole question of Israelis and Palestinians and whether there will be reconciliation and where will Syria go and Iran. It's a very unstable region, and it's just a question of whether or not this will be a more stable and peaceful area.
Do you think there is a too strong of a we versus they mentality among the American people, in that many of the Kurds are saying today that if it were hundreds of Americans or French men who were being killed, as the Kurds are now, by Saddam Hussein, the United States and all of the Allied powers would be in there today in full force. But because it is just the Kurds who are dying, the American people don't really care. Do you think the American people are that heartless?
That's a difficult question that you're putting to me as a senator and as somebody who has, you know, tried to say what I've always believed about the war. I do not believe people in this country are heartless. I don't think that we really, given press censorship and all, were able to see that much of what did happen with the war. Now we're beginning to see what's happened to the Kurds. I think people care about it. To me, the loss of life of any man or woman is an awful thing, a terrible thing, American or not American. I think a lot of people that are now kind of listening to us speak and, you know, and thinking about this are just not quite sure what they should do. I don't think people, Jan, are just ignoring this in our country or in our state.
What would be the role now for the United Nations or the U.S. or the Allies, or, you know, we're here now in real time, what should happen?
Right. I think two things at the minimum. One, absolute all-out effort for humanitarian aid. Now it's starting, I understand, today. And second of all, a role through the United Nations to try and exert maximum kind of leverage on Saddam Hussein. And what that means, Eric, is not clear. I mean, I don't think anyone's talking about ground troops, but maybe there is some way that some kind of a peacekeeping mission can go in there.
What about
you've got to make the effort.
Some dairy farm issues. You've been around the state, and you and some other farm state legislators tried to do some dairy price work, and that was scuttled by the administration and your own colleagues in the Senate. Anything going to happen before the August recess?
Not in the Senate. It was passed in the Senate, but then left out in the House. You know, I've been traveling the state, and I love people, and, you know, I just keep meeting people. But the one thing I can say is I leave this trip feeling two different things. One, just to meet people, talk with people, wanting everything I do to be grounded in people and a variety of things. Feels good. But the dairy farmers, people tug at you, you know, and people say, please, we're gonna lose our farm. I mean, there's so much desperation, tears, and pain, and I'm not being melodramatic. And I say to myself, you know, we lost the first fight, we got to go back through it again. I mean, I want to be in the Senate, you know, to work for people, to help people, to make a difference. It's a desperate situation. Price is way too low.
You got a shot to improve it here before August?
Well,
recess?
We've got to, I've got to go back, and I've got to, you know, push hard in the Senate, go through committees, and the administration, I thought the threat of the veto really hurt, and we just have got to push hard, and I mean be a real strong voice about it. People are going under, and it's wrong. It's just simply unconscionable.
Congress back in session, what, Tuesday?
Yeah.
Appreciate you coming down. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me.
Paul Wellstone.
Thank you, Senator.
Bye-bye.
My dictionary now has two definitions for summit. The first listing is highest point, the top, the zenith. The other definition is for what happened last night: posturing, bickering, and politicking. Still trying to recover from last night and living in fear that there will be a third summit is tonight's version of the political panel. DJ Leary is a media guru and DFLer. Chris Sanda is back with us. She, of course, works for the governor, but assures us that doesn't mean she will be too tough on him. Marcy Lear is also an active independent Republican, used to work for the governor. Vivian Jenkins Nelson never worked for this governor because she is a DFLer. Words of wise analysis about the son of the summit last night. DJ?
As really exciting television, a test pattern were more interesting. I mean, it wasn't good politics, it wasn't good television, it wasn't good theater, it wasn't good conversation, it wasn't a good fight, it didn't move the needle 1 micro inch one way or the other. It was just a very boring pastime that brought a lot of people together to chant and yell outside the Capitol.
Marcy Lear. Governor Carlson, when he came to office, certainly in his initial addresses to the legislature, seemed to call for great bipartisanship as a theme of his administration. Has that absolutely gone out the window?
No, last night was very bipartisan. Everybody agreed on nothing. I mean, what's wrong with that? You know, I disagree with you, DJ. You said it was not good politics. It was good politics. It gave the Republicans one more chance at reminding the voters out there that it's the Democrats that got us into this mess, and it's the Democrats who are responsible for the high tax increases we're getting this year, and now that's good politics.
Well, it depends on when you say a bipartisan, whether it really has been a bipartisan approach, because both the Republicans and the Democrats got plans that are different than the governor's. So
That's
I'm
true.
not sure that one would call it unity.
Are we, was it Senator Mondale who was quoted, Ted Mondale was quoted in the paper saying we're sort of a near California, Massachusetts tax revolt? Yeah. I mean, the folks in greater Minnesota are upset about what's being proposed. The folks in town here are worried about what is existing. Everybody's mad at everybody. Are we, you're a boiling point here? Or Chris, we haven't talked to you in a while. Nice to have you back.
Well, thank you. Nice to be here as a couch potato.
Well, do you sense everybody mad about property taxes for whatever reason?
Sure, everyone's mad about too much taxes, period. But I think Governor Carlson has hit the nail on the head by saying we've spent too much for too long. Our American Express bill has come due, and we have to learn how to live within our income. Now, regardless of what was in the pipeline from the Democrats or what was in the pipeline from the Republicans, Arnie Carlson is going to be a reform governor. And whether or not we've bitten off too much reform is another matter. But things are going to change because we can't continue to afford what we've been doing.
But Vivian, this strikes right at the core DFL group, which is protecting that middle and lower income homeowner. That's the core of the DFL constituency. How can reform exist with that type of a...
Well, the last time I was here, as you will recall, I predicted what was going to happen, and it happened last night. One of the things that's real key is that my neighbors come and they stop in the house and they talk about what's going to happen, and they're getting their tax bills, and they're very upset about it. And so the bottom line here, as I said before, and I'll say it again, is how much, which you hit the nail on the head again, which is how much reform can we manage in this particular cycle without crushing people.
Well, I think this is going to continue to be debated until the 11th hour, which is May 20th, or could be extended into July. Let's switch to another topic, workers' compensation. Here again, we have a debate going on. Yes, I see the sneers. Here again, we have a debate going on. Now, DJ Leary, you, one of your clients is the Minnesota Business Partnership, I believe, so you have something of a vested... Yes, one of many. So you have something of a
policy. We're going to start a disclaimer on.
Yes.
Well, you have to on this one.
This is only an hour-long program, so I can't mention them all at one time.
But in fact, you heard Senator Frank say on this couch but a few moments ago, hey, wait a minute, foul play here. The Minnesota Business Partnership just 2 years ago said that they would support a transfer of administrative costs onto the state tax rolls, and now they're saying no.
But 2 years ago, you weren't looking at $1 billion worth of shortfall coming at them, and to heap $39 million or $32 million more onto that just flies in the face of everything that's at least a little bit sane. I mean, we've left the historic portion of it out that they were rolling pretty good a couple of years ago trying to get it. This bill, I think what will happen this next week, I think there's going to be a big crunch period. The Minnesota Chamber Board is coming together again on Thursday, and I was called by Scott Lambert this afternoon. There are 6, 8, 9 chamber members out there, other chambers of commerce from cities, that are passing resolutions, have already, or are doing it prior to Wednesday, jumping off the parent Minnesota Chamber train, because there's a real belief that no bill is better than this compromise bill. And the reason is political, because that once the legislature feels they've dealt with it, I mean, this is like grinding glass in it. You don't want to do it legislatively, and it'll be 5, 6, 7 years ago, again, before they deal with it.
Can I hop in here?
Please.
I'm not paid by anybody. I am an injured worker on workers' comp, and I think it's a very difficult thing to talk about without sort of like the smoke rolling out of your ears. But the system is seriously flawed, and even in both bills, as I read and tried to look at the issues that are raised, I think it's very important that they get rid of the mandatory voc rehab issue. I mean, that's a boondoggle. I mean, I had a woman calling me up wanting to know if I want to do manicurist training. No, I want to get back to my job at the university. You know, and this entire system is adversarial, and that's where the costs are. I have sat in doctors' offices where there's nobody there, because that's all this guy does, is workers' comp exams. It takes you a year to get in there, and he gets $1,500 for 1 hour's worth of work. This is seriously flawed. When you get when you get any number of people, I'm thinking about 100 people, if they have 2 sets of lawyers fighting over a claim that's worth $1,500 worth of rehab, and they take it to the state Supreme Court twice, what is that costing us? That's nuts. And so I think what we still haven't gotten to are the enormous medical costs in either of these proposals, and we have not gotten to the structural problems with an adversarial system.
I think the structural thing is clearly what Malin Schneider was even talking about. You've got to get some kind of structurals. I've got a daughter that is an injured worker. I've got a son that's a lawyer. I got about every interest around, you know, in this whole argument. But the fact of the matter is, it's so expensive, and every country boy knows you can't have more people riding the wagon than you got pulling it.
Can I ask the Republicans something? I've been dying to ask. How is the governor doing with his Republican Party? Marcy, you've been on either side of this deal. What is he doing well with the party regulars? Badly? What's shaking?
You want the no comment answer
No,
here?
I want you to tell it like it is on the political panel.
No, there's some problems with the party.
Revolving around what?
Revolving around the fact that there doesn't seem to be enough reaching out. There doesn't seem to be, it's not inclusive. There's lots of work to be done there.
Chris, is there some internal balm being applied? Or what's going on?
I think Arnie's doing a great job in 3 arenas. He's looking ahead. He's looking toward reform. He's looking to be a change agent. He's saying to all of us, look beyond our fences. Don't think like we always think. When you challenge a system and when you challenge the way of thinking, then the typical Republican reaction or the typical DFL reaction, oh, who got a job, who didn't get a job, those kinds of thoughts have to go beyond the boards. It was a coalition that put Arnie Carlson in there. It's a coalition that's going to keep him in there. And I think he's just doing one neato job. Are we perfect? No. Are we learning? Yes. Are we better than perfect? By a long shot.
DJ Leary, Marcy Lear, Vivian Jenkins Nelson, Chris Sandus, thank you.
That sounded like a school cheer, didn't it?
Like sands through the hourglass, these are the index file questions. Our last episode concerned Princeton University. It is, of course, a prestigious institution located in Princeton, New Jersey, we threw you the following factoids. Founded in 1746, member of the Ivy League, Woodrow Wilson was president there. Albert Einstein toured the premises at least once. Keeping in mind this lofty history and mission, we told you each year Princeton awards honorary degrees to important citizens of the world. And on June 9, 1970, those degrees were granted to civil rights leader Coretta Scott King, publisher Walter Lippmann, and a Minnesotan whom the institution said shuns publicity and organizations. Our question: what noted Minnesotan was awarded an honorary degree at Princeton University on June 9, 1970? Now, we have to admit we were pleased with the answers to this question. We did not realize our viewers even knew the names of anyone illustrious, so we're proud of you, but you're still wrong.
The answer of the honorary doctorate is Walter Heller.
I think the answer is Hubert Humphrey. The answer to your question on this evening of March 22nd, 1991 is none other than Mr. Norman Borlaug.
My guess would probably be Bud Grant.
No, Bud received his honorary PhD in Canada. Ironically, though, Paul's is the closest wrong answer, since Bud Grant's singing skills probably rivaled those of the correct answer. For that, let's go to this elated anonymous viewer.
This is great. I watch Almanac every week, and finally I can get an index file card question right. The answer to the question is Bob Dylan, and he received his degree at Princeton and immortalized it in the song Days of the Locust on his New Morning album. There was little to say, there was no conversation as I stepped to the stage to pick up my degree. Thank you. Gotta go now. I'm all tangled up in blue. See you later. Why does everyone talk so slow when they call in these answers, by the way?
Elocution. It's called elocution, but we liked your speedy answer. If anyone here could say it, it would be the trademark of the Almanac program. Yes, Anonymous has got it right. Hibbing's own Robert Zimmerman received an honorary PhD in music, recognizing him as a folk singer and composer who devised and popularized folk rock. Let's move on. The producers dug deep into that index file bin and came up with this brain teaser. Listen up, because I am going to name 14 Minnesota counties. Ready? Becker, Beltrami, Blue Earth, Clearwater, Cook, Cottonwood, Dakota, Douglas, Faribault, Marshall, Pennington, Ramsey, Rice, and Swift. There they are. The 14 counties named here share something. Perhaps a dubious distinction that says not too much about what they do share, but we're going to give you a little bit hint. Look at a list of anything around our state and see what they may share. Now, Eric and I think the producers have gone off the deep end with this one, but they want you to guess what these 14 counties have in common. So, of course, there may be many things they have in common, but the producers want you to guess the thing they have in mind. Again, here are a couple of clues. The thing these counties have in common concerns something they share with other counties that may or may not be on that list I told you about. But if you looked at a map of Minnesota long enough, you'd figure it out. Now call our answering machines and give it your best shot. The number is 612-229-1430. Now this question was inspired by a caller last week, so Anonymous, if you know who you are, you're not eligible to answer. But the rest of you, especially Nick Coleman, you are encouraged. Write it down, 612-229-1430. Leave your answers, yes, but also your opinions about any topic, especially those we covered tonight. Last week, a good part of the program focused on the decision of a Hennepin County grand jury not to bring charges against a Minneapolis police officer in the shooting death of a black teenager. Many of your comments ran along these lines.
An enormous amount of man-hours were spent on this investigation, and the outcome should be accepted. The black community seems to think that a white jury can't return a fair verdict. Is it their contention that black jurors would automatically deem Officer Mays guilty no matter what the facts were?
The only thing the black community has to protest is the fact that a police officer defended himself in the line of duty by shooting what appears to be an armed individual. But the only thing we hear about the black community is about their so-called murder perpetrated against one of theirs. Well, if they really cared, they would be concerned about black-on-black crime and black-on-white crime, because the real criminals are out there shooting and cutting and knifing, and the black community is obviously paralyzed because nobody will come forward and testify.
And our segment 2 weeks ago on the John Grunseth campaign with former campaign workers Leon Oysted and Dave Hoyam brought a legion of callers who agreed with this viewer.
After listening to the Grunseth campaign workers' repeated references to the girls, quote unquote, I can see not only why John Grunseth was forced to drop out, but I can also quite clearly see why he and his campaign workers will never understand why he had to drop out.
One more item. 2 weeks from now, on Sunday, April 21st, Channel 2 will be taping a program called Boring Budget Basics. The show is going to try to explain how our state budget works in a human, understandable way, and to do that, we need humans. So, if you want to be part of a studio audience on April 21st for what should be an unusual, maybe even amusing show, call us at 612-229-1430, and please remember to leave your name and number. That's all for our program tonight. Until next week, for Eric Leslie Escala, this is Jan Ingrid Smaybe. Good night.
Funding for Almanac